Hey Siri, what was my spending like in 2024?
Hey Siri, what was my spending like in 2024? That is
Web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
one of the most frustrating things about making this entire video is having that prompt and then having HomePods or iPads or iPhones that are obviously in this Apple office try to respond and tell me that they can look something up on the internet. That's obviously not what we need, what we want, what the competitive market is starting to introduce in terms of artificial intelligence. And Apple is struggling in order to achieve the promise of the future. So here's the question.
Hey Siri, what was my spending like in 2024?
All right, if you missed it there, the wallet app gets launched and the question is asked, what was the spending like? So that implies getting all of the information, which is demonstrated here. Boom. All right, so let's just say that there were 5 years that Siri was sorting through on the phone, picked out 2024, and then we have the fun that begins with the end-to-end encryption and the rest of this video. Welcome to the breakdown. It's just never fun when you're at the Halloween party and you spend a lot of time on your costume, and then people are like, "Wow, what is that?" You know, part of making a great costume. Let me move out of the way of the graphics here. But part of the thing about making a great costume is you don't need to explain it. People just get it right away. Oh, like you're Andy and you're Raggedy Ann. There we go. Great, you guys nailed it. If you have to be like, well, in George Orwell's 1984. You know, that's not fun. So I'm kind of in that situation with this video. We spent probably more time on it than certainly any other short that we've done so far, Mr. Mac. And for those of you who are local to the town, you'll get to see some of my family in here and maybe some familiar faces in places. So that hopefully is fun and also hopefully informative on what we were trying to achieve with this video. So let's listen to the songs. AI is used in many different areas in this to make this video successful in terms of the production elements. And really, I wanted and needed to take this time to try and communicate what it is we were trying to get across because it didn't seem to land. What seemed to land was that Apple's Apple Intelligence is private and it's awesome. It should be awesome in the near future, but right now there's a big problem, actually two big problems, and we're going to talk about both of them over the coming weeks. All right, here we go. Let's have some fun. There he goes. All right, so stop right here. So it's end-to-end encrypted. Let's actually back up just a little bit. All right, so it goes into this box as end-to-end encrypted. This is the process that Apple has announced for their private cloud compute. Because your data is encrypted, your data just looks like a jumbled mess. It is mathematically protected by uncrackable calculation that is either done at 128-bit or 256-bit, which is even more ridiculous in terms of how well it's secured. So it's on your iPhone and it cannot be read by anything that is not an iPhone, an iPad, or a Mac that is logged in and two-factor authenticated. So what we're trying to say here is now Siri has found the information that it needs by getting 2024's records. We can see here actually in this freeze frame, I'm gonna try and point here, that is real data of a transaction list. Okay, so if you say, let me just get a spreadsheet of every transaction I had in 2024, there you go. And it's going into and re-encrypting from the phone, which it's de-encrypted so you can see it. Siri has found the correct information, but Siri doesn't have the ability to actually process that information into anything usable. So what it's gonna do is re-encrypt it, which is simulated by this little box here, and then take it to the cloud. So it's going to go through your data. It's going to find the right information. It's going to re-encrypt it and send it encrypted to the cloud, which we'll see here in a ton of fun with some jumping and running. There it goes. Let's pause it right there. Private cloud compute is being simulated by this building here. So it's a server. If you've been to our iCloud class, we spent a long time talking about what is the cloud. It's a building. It's the size of a super Walmart, maybe two super Walmarts put together, and inside are just rows and rows of computers and hard drives and processing units in this case. So we've encrypted the data. The encrypted data is running off and going to go to the cloud. And we're going to hear a fun song that I loved when I made it. I thought it was a great capture of the problem. That was the issue. I tried to capture the problem, which is that not even Apple can see the data. So they can't run computations on it like ChatGPT or OpenAI or Gemini from Google can. And because they can't run computations on it, it's a huge problem for their development of the technology. But instead, I think all we got was this super fun song about how secure Apple is. So let's give it a listen here while we're seeing some of the antics of your data being processed.
Not even Apple can see your data. Not even Apple can see your data.
All right, so here we go. It gets in there, not even Apple can see your data, because this computational node is the only part of this process that has the other key. So the keys, let's just say it simply. When the data gets sent to the private cloud, there's this private key that your phone has, and then it goes and gets the public key here from private cloud compute, and they do a little handshake. So when the encrypted data gets to the private cloud computer, there's these nodes inside, and one instance of a processing node that is ready to process the data. So you send this request off to the private cloud compute, and then the node takes it and says, okay, what's the request and what data do I need to process to get an answer to the question that was asked that came along with this data? So you can see here it's a one-time helper, and we're going to get more into these computational nodes that Apple has very clearly outlined in their private cloud compute rundown.
Not even.
Okay, so there's no one who's allowed to peek in once it gets there. Now you have again, we got to explain too much here, but that's okay. That's okay. We did our best. You got the computational node that's working the data, okay, like taking all this crumpled mess and making it into something useful, which we can see here is basically comes back as like a pie chart and some bar graphs and says, hey, you did great on your spending, or maybe you shouldn't eat so much avocado toast. One of the two is going to come back from ChatGPT, just like I have downloaded my transactions from my bank statements and uploaded them to ChatGPT, and it's a much faster way to say, hey, where are the subscriptions? And instead of going through line by line, just say, hey, what online subscriptions am I paying for? Are we paying for 2 Hulus and 2 Netflixes? That's a problem. Is Mr. Mac as a company paying for $70 a month for Notion or for 10 Slack seats? That's too high. Let's quickly take care of that. These are some of the things that you legitimately can do with AI. And if we have here the bars and charts, they're supposed to represent the results that come from the raw data, which is the AI promise. Let's give it some raw data and let's let it take about 2 seconds. And then let's get some good information back that we can take action on and improve our life. All right, let's keep going.
Data. The private compute cloud is so
Boom, and here's the most important part as the song ramps up. The data is processed, the information is on its way back. So you say, hey, everything is good, it comes from the cloud, here's the charts, send that back to the iPhone and tell this guy to stop ordering so much Favor or Uber Eats. This is what Apple bragged about in WWDC 24 now, over a year ago, about it is stateless. Again, this is in their write-up online, but the computational nodes are stateless, which means the data is gone once you're done interacting with it. Sounds awesome and secure until ChatGPT introduced memory. And so now whenever we at Mr. Mac are putting together marketing material or to write an email to a supplier, we don't have to explain every single time who we are, what the company brand voice is, the way that we want and the length that we want to construct these emails. It remembers it and it knows what kind of brand voice we want to use with every single thing that we communicate. It's amazing in terms of the benefits. So now we have this problem with Apple because they've made this promise to be stateless in their data, but we're about to see the results of that promise.
even Apple can see your data.
All right, boom. So We have the results, and what is, of course, going to be the follow-up question to one of these?
Can we do the same for 2023?
Okay, there we go. All right, good. I didn't freeze frame on there. Can you do the same for 2023? Hey, my spending was pretty good this year. How does it compare to last year? Very reasonable question. But if it does not retain the data, then it has to go through that whole process again and not only get 2023 this time, but now it has to collect 2024 and then send both of those off to the private cloud compute after decrypting, re-encrypting, decrypting again, processing the data, re-encrypting it, and sending it all the way back as evidenced by those lockboxes and then all the running that was trying to be illustrated there. That is a problem for the Apple Intelligence model, which is why we're seeing the Apple Intelligence model change right now. And so we have a decision to make as a customer base. Are we pumped about the increased level of security at the expense of certainly both speed, but also a reasonable conversation with Siri so that it's kind of enjoyable finally and not just like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you asked. And lastly, the reason that we care about Apple Intelligence specifically is not because we want Apple to be successful and we feel bad that they're behind the other big players in the space like Microsoft and Google and OpenAI and Gronk and Perplexity. That's not why. We don't just want them to be successful so that they look competitive in the market. It's because the iPhone specifically holds data that can be very useful to process with any sort of artificial intelligence or Apple Intelligence model. Like this app right here, the Wallet app. All of the transactions we do, especially if you're on Apple Pay, and if you're not, please get on it. It's way more secure. Are recorded so that you can easily ask questions about like, hey, my bank account just hit zero. Why did that happen? And it should be able to, in a perfect world, just look and be like, oh, you had a kind of a weird $209 charge. Is that something you want me to look into and even take action on that? But it's really limited because it has to send all that, re-encrypt it to the cloud, process it, and then it doesn't remember what you're talking about later. So it's not going to learn your spending habits. It's not going to learn the things that should be in the transaction log and the things that shouldn't be in the transaction log. And then therefore, it's definitely not going to get ahead of the curve and warn you about things, upcoming bills that you actually don't want processed or aren't expecting before, let's say, the rent check comes out. Hey, did you know that maybe I'm trying to look out for you and you're about to miss rent? The iPhone in particular, because it knows our reminders and the main one I want is notes. Like I have hundreds of notes in there that I would love to be able to just ask questions about, because the reason I wrote it down was so I could forget it. That's why I wrote it down. Look how good a yellow piece of paper does at remembering stuff versus my brain. It just holds it perfectly, exactly how it was written, never changes. But Notes in particular is 256-bit end-to-end encrypted, and not even Apple has the keys to it, which they've been bragging about for years, and probably rightfully so. But they have a huge task ahead of them if they're going to figure out how to process this stuff efficiently while still maintaining the privacy. So that is the purpose of this video. Thank you for watching the recap. If you made it all this way, you will be thrilled to know there is more to come, because this is all we're going to be talking about this week, next week, the week after that, as we really unfold as Apple redecides what it's going to do in the space. Are they buying Perplexity? Are they getting another deal with ChatGPT? Does ChatGPT have enough equity after they sold 49% to Microsoft to even do a deal like that? And what is going on with Johnny Ives? All of that and more coming up on the Mr. Mac Show. Stay tuned.